guys, it is time for our fourth grade lesson. So we have talked about the coming of the universe. We talked about the coming of life. And then we talked about the coming of humans. And when we talked about the coming of humans, we talked about three things that made us different from other animals. One was our big brains. One was our opposable thumbs. And the third thing was our very highly specialized vocal cords and lips and mouth and tongue, teeth, tongue, yep, the things that make up your mouth part here. All of those things came together to make it so that we were able to communicate through speaking. Now, out of that, spoken language came, right? We needed something and we were able to come up with the idea for words to have spoken language with each other. But I'm going to tell you a story about how we learned to write, because that's what we're working on this week. It's all about writing and reading and how to communicate using writing. So, this is a true story, guys, ish. When men, women, and children first lived on Earth, they needed food to eat, as all animals, and in fact all living things do. Because this was so very long ago, there were, of course, no supermarkets. But there were lots of good things to eat around the earth. There were plants, and humans are omnivores, so there were other animals. There were lots of things that we could eat. So they told each other about what they'd found that was good to eat. Now this worked out just fine, except for one little problem. Suppose I needed to tell someone who was not sitting right next to me about some food that I found to eat. How could I tell that person? Well, someone, and we don't know who, and we don't know when, but a long time ago, someone decided to maybe make a picture. The picture drawn said what might have been said in words if the person had been there. So maybe I wanted to show someone that there was a plant with really good bushes that way. I could draw a picture of a plant with really good, I meant to say berries, but I realized that I said bushes. I could draw a picture of a plant with really good berries and maybe like an arrow pointing that way. And that could communicate plant with good berries, that direction, okay? So for a long time, this is probably what people did. Pictures were made of what was important and what they wanted to show others. For example, a hunter wanted to record that 10 animals were spotted, so he or she drew a picture of 10 animals, or an animal with 10 strokes underneath. Time went on, people continued to draw pictures. Now we know this because some of these pictures were preserved in caves, and on Google Classroom you can find some pictures of some of the early cave pictures that we have. I will post that up there. Okay, on with the story. There was a group of people called the Egyptians, and they lived in northern Africa on the banks of the Nile River. Some of you may have heard of Egyptians before, and in fact, there still is a country called Egypt, and there are still people called Egyptians who live there. But we're talking about ancient Egyptians. They made lots of pictures. They carved some in stone, some they painted on stone, but they did something else. They made something very close to paper from a plant that grew near the river. They first painted pictures on this paper with a brush, and then later they invented a pen to write their picture messages. Now, as you're probably imagining, sometimes people get confused by pictures. That can happen. This was especially true when people started using the same picture for different meanings, as the Egyptians did. For example, a picture of a leg could mean a leg. Seems pretty straightforward. It could also mean an idea, the idea of running, because a leg is used to run. So it could mean a leg, it could mean to run, or it could also mean a sound that corresponded to the meaning for quickly, because you can move quickly on your leg. So the picture of a leg could mean 3 different things. So that could get a little bit confusing. All right, moving just a little bit, we'll see how this is solved. There were other people, other groups of people living around the Mediterranean Sea, north of Africa. And one of these people were the Phoenicians. They were merchants to people living all around the Mediterranean, and they settled from place to place with their goods. They sailed all around with their goods. They carried all manner of things, ivory and spices and incense and food and silver and ornaments and glass. And they also sold one very special thing. Now, only the Phoenicians carried this. It was a special dye called Tyrian purple. It was the purple of kings because it was very hard to get. And this dye came from a tiny shellfish, which each one just had a type, Each shellfish only had one drop in its tiny little sac. So imagine how many shellfish you would need to get some amount of this dye, millions of them. Now, because the Phoenicians discovered this dye, the Phoenicians were super duper duper rich because it was so expensive. It was a really important business. But that's not really why they're important to us. They're important to us because they traded with the Egyptians, who by now had pictures that only meant sounds. And what is important about the dye is that it made the Phoenicians really influential because they had so much money. Okay, so getting back to the Egyptians. They knew the Egyptians. They traded with the Egyptians. The Egyptians had pictures that by now meant just sounds and not only objects. And they were merchants who needed a really fast way to record their business transactions, right? So they kept very cleverly, they kept only the sound pictures of the Egyptians, not the pictures that meant leg. They only kept the third meaning, the sound that meant quick, that corresponded to quickly, okay? This picture then could tell many different things, and best of all, it was easy to tell just what was meant when the sound was made. The Phoenicians found out what you found out or are finding out as you work with our sound boxes, or if you were in another Montessori preschool, maybe with the sandpaper letters. This mark makes this sound. If I see the letter A, I say ah. This symbol makes a sound. That's what the Phoenicians figured out. That's what they did with the Egyptian pictures. Isn't that clever? Even this is not quite the end of the story, but we're almost there. Another group of people, called the Greeks, changed the shapes of the Phoenician letters. And then the Romans changed those shapes just a little bit more. And it was the Romans who called these letters the alphabet. The letters that you learn are almost exactly the same as the letters invented by the Romans a long, long time ago. And in fact, if you find Roman writing anywhere, we can usually read it because the letters look the same. But it was the Phoenicians who were the first to use what we know now as the alphabet. They were the first ones to come up with that sound to picture idea. So, when you read a book, like this awesome book, The Word Dragon by Tevin Hansen, whenever you read a book like this, just remember, it is the Phoenicians who started the idea to write only sounds on paper. And so that I could take those sounds and read them back to you, or you could take those sounds and read them aloud, and then you can hear the story that Tevin Hansen wrote in his book. Pretty awesome of the Phoenicians. All right, guys, that is the end of this lesson. Next time we'll learn all about the coming of numbers.